Welcome to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I am your host, Angie Grant. In this podcast, we dig deep into some of our biggest parenting struggles. Oftentimes, those struggles mask themselves as behaviors in our kids, right? That's what we see. That's what we get all fired up about. That's what we end up desperately seeking resources for our kids or punishments or trying to understand what in the world is happening in our home. Oftentimes here we talk about the the challenging behaviors, right? The arguing, the yelling, the screaming, the tantrums, the meltdowns, the in your face behaviors. But today I want to dig in on the opposite end because as you're listening to this episode, sometimes the things that I say with you will resonate. And sometimes you're like, yeah, it'd almost be easier if my child would argue with me or if they would, engage in some kind of behaviors, but my kids are just downright lazy. I don't like using labels. We had a pretty strict rule in our house about no name calling, right? You can talk about how you're feeling. You can describe another person's behaviors, but we don't name call. So lazy is not anything that I ever called my kids to their face or to anybody else. But that idea of having kids who they won't pick up their room, they won't help around the house, they won't engage in activities with the family, they won't get involved in sports, perhaps, or they won't do their homework. Whatever that won't looks like for you in your home, this episode is for you. So, I want to talk about what exactly is underneath this lack of doing, this laziness, as we'll call it here in this episode. I want to talk about what's really underneath that because it's probably not at all what you think. When our kids, or quite frankly, ourselves, are not doing, sometimes it's a choice, right? Sometimes we just need a break. Sometimes we just need to do nothing. But I think that more often than not, more often than we will even admit for ourselves, when we're not doing things, it isn't because we just don't want to. It's because our nervous system is getting in the way. So, what do I mean by that? Well, our nervous system is designed, as we talk about quite a bit here in this podcast, but our nervous system is designed to keep us safe. That's kind of the purest, most simple way to describe it. It's designed to keep us safe. Originally, it was designed to keep us safe from real dangers, bears and tigers and all, scary things, right? That's what it was originally designed for, just like other mammals. Today in our society, at least here where I am in the Midwest, there aren't a ton of fears like that, right? Perceived threat is different than actual, real life-threatening situations. In my everyday life, I have very few, if ever, life-threatening situations. Probably a car accident is probably the scariest, right? Yet my brain responds in fight or flight mode on a regular basis to things such as fear of being ridiculed, fear that I won't be good enough, fear that I haven't prepared enough, fear of what people will think, right? And I like to think that I really don't care what other people will think. But this isn't a logical thing that my brain is doing. It is a nervous system response. And the same is true for our kids. It actually starts when our kids are young, when they're little. When we as parents or other caregivers in our kids' lives start giving them feedback about whether or not they're good or bad, or trying hard enough or not trying hard enough, or that they have made a mistake. These pieces of feedback create a space where our kids can develop a story in their nervous system, not in their mind. I mean, part of it's in their mind, but in their nervous system about safety. Because when we give our kids feedback when they're little, and I'm not saying this to shame you, right? I want to increase awareness because we think that when our kids are being lazy at 10 or 12 or 15 years old, we think that they are the problem. And I'm not saying this that you are the problem either. What I'm saying is when we have this awareness about what is really underneath that behavior, it helps us make decisions about what we do about it. Because currently in, what I watch in my life around me, our current mode of parenting, more often than not, is to be frustrated with our kids when they're not behaving in a way that we like. But what if those behaviors are a nervous system response? What if the truth underneath that perceived laziness is a kid who they have shut down because it doesn't feel safe or okay to be who they are, or it doesn't feel safe or okay to make mistakes, or it doesn't feel safe or okay to do things that don't light them up. And I know life isn't all sunshine and daisies, right? Like I'm not naive to, what real expectations there are in the world. But here's what I know about the way that we are designed as humans. When I look through the lens of human design, we all come into this life situation with energetic needs. There's energy that we put out into the world and energy that we pick up from others. And we're all so incredibly unique. But when our energetic needs are not met, then it gives feedback to our nervous system that it isn't safe or okay. It gives feedback to our nervous system that there's a mismatch. And then we try to figure it out or we try to respond differently. So let me share some examples. One example being that a projector type, right? So both of my kids are projector types, and that energy type needs to feel recognized. They need to be invited, they need to feel recognized, not just because it's nice to do, but because it turns on their energy. It engages them in life and what's happening. And so raising projector kids, I didn't know this about them when they were little. I didn't know that recognition and invitations were key to turning on their energy. Instead, as a mom, I would see kids who struggled to clean up their rooms, for example, or struggled to help out with chores, or struggled to get homework done, or whatever it might be, because I didn't know this about them. I didn't know that they needed a different kind of recognition than I do. I'm not a projector type. My needs are very different than my kids. But when we know this about our kids, that's one example. Generators, like myself, although a generator type has consistent access to energy to do things, to create things, if a generator type isn't doing work that lights them up, that they love, and by work, I mean it could be anything. It could be creating things. It could be, for our kids, right? When I think about work, the work of our kids is often play. And for some, that's arts. For some, it's sports. For some, it's music. For some, that work that they do is academics. But if we're giving our kids feedback or pushing them to do things that feel misaligned to them, if we're not allowing them to really tap into what their body is telling them is right or wrong for them, and we're pushing them to do things because it's what we want, then what we have are these kids who are engaging in activities. Maybe they're in sports or they're in something else, but it's not aligned with them. And they might be having fun for a whole slew of reasons, but if it doesn't feel right to them, then the result is kids who can check out, disengage, not have sustained energy to do other things. Or our reflector type kiddos who they have this beautiful gift to understand energetically what people in their community, in their family, in their school are going through. But when we don't support our reflector kids in helping them to shed that energy at the end of the day that isn't theirs by supporting healthy sleep practices, For example, a reflector type really needs to lie flat on their back and do something without a screen to just shed off energy that they picked up throughout the day. That energy is for them to learn from, but it's not for them to hold on to. But if we have a reflector type kiddo, for example, and they're watching screens right up until they go to bed, or they're wearing themselves out and then zonking out at the end of the day, they haven't taken the time to shed that extra energy. And so they can quickly become burned out because they're holding on to all this energy that isn't theirs. Or another example, third lines, right? So the third line profile is a type that learns through doing and learns through making mistakes. They don't learn from us telling them what to do. But as parents, we feel all this pressure that it's our job to teach our kids right from wrong and how to do this and how to do that. But not all of our kids are designed that way. Some of our kids are not designed to learn by being taught by others. Some of our kids and some of us are designed to learn through doing and doing it wrong so that they learn from that. But when we don't know that about our kids and we're trying so hard to teach them and not let them make mistakes and we're we're protecting our kids from ever feeling the feeling of failure, we're blocking their access to their energy. So when I think about this idea of kids being lazy, and what I think that that really is a reflection of is us not understanding as parents what our kids really need. And then their nervous system is holding on to all this feedback that we unknowingly give our kids, right? You're not doing anything wrong. You're being a good parent. But when we really understand what our kids need, we get to we get to learn how to show up differently for them. We get to learn how to give them different feedback than maybe we were given, or maybe than we ourselves need as parents. As I said, my kids need something so very different than I need. Even something as simple as how I ask my kids questions. Now that I understand human design and how to really tap in to my authority and my kids' authority, I need yes, no questions. You ask me an open-ended question, and I will use my mind to figure out, but when I'm using my mind to figure it out, it's never my truth. My mind is taking into account how it's going to impact you and how much money it's going to cost and how will we get it done. And it's doing all this problem solving and worrying about other people's feelings, worrying about other people's thoughts because I care and I'm sensitive. But when I do that, when you ask me an open-ended question and I talk it out, what really happens is that I'm not tapping into my own authority, which is my sacral. My kids, on the other hand, yes, no questions cause them to make conditioned responses. It causes them to tap into sacral that they don't have defined. And so they're trying to answer a yes, no question, but they're not designed to do that. And so understanding this about my kids, and both my kids then have different ways of coming to their own truth, right? One talk it out, the other one really has to trust their gut or trust their splenic response, not their sacral, has to trust their splenic response, which is so different. They're so different than each other, right? But me, when I know that about my kids and I revert back to asking them yes, no questions, I I keep working on, oh, wait, that yes, no answer that I got there might not have fully been their truth. And I'll ask the question again in a more open-ended way to allow them to come to their own truth that is right for them, not right for me. I don't want them to answer questions that are right for me. I want them to answer questions that are right for them. So when we know these sometimes really simple tricks, how to better support our kids, that is where we really start to change this behavior, right? We called it laziness as we were first talking, but what if that laziness is really a nervous system that has shut down because it doesn't know what to do, a nervous system that is afraid to make another mistake, a nervous system that is afraid of getting feedback that hurts. What if what we see as laziness really is a nervous system that is afraid to push and not be good enough? So that's my challenge for you is I know I often leave you with something practical at the end of every episode, but today I'm going to leave it with a contemplation. I really want you, if lazy is something that you think about your kiddo or think about your partner or think about yourself, my challenge for you this week is to really reflect on that and reflect on what is it really about? Is it a fear of success, a fear of failure, a fear of judgment? What is really underlying that lack of doing? Because I trust in my heart that whether it's you or your kids or your partner or whoever it might be, I trust in my heart that that lack of doing probably isn't laziness. I don't think, whatever your belief system is about how we came to be on this planet, I don't believe that any of us were created to be lazy. I don't believe that any of us were created to be miserable or unhappy. I think that life gets in the way and leaves these marks on our nervous system. We don't even see it happening, but they're there. And it's influencing the way we show up for ourselves, the way we show up for our kids, the way we show up for our most important relationships. But that doesn't have to be the end of the story because once we know what's going on here, we get to do something about it. My go-to when it comes to nervous system stuff is EFT tapping. I find it an incredibly powerful way to help release negative energy that has latched onto our nervous system. But we first have to know, well, that's not true. With EFT tapping, you don't always necessarily even have to know what is at the root of that, right? I did ask you to reflect on what's really underneath that. It is helpful to know what that feeling is. And I feel strongly that it's probably some type of fear. When we know what that fear is, when we can name it and then use a strategy such as tapping, or there are lots of other amazing nervous system regulation tools out there, but when we can then use a tool to help kind of pick that piece of the story off of our nervous system and create a nervous system that is calm and regulated and not holding on to fear for things that aren't true. That's where we create space to start taking action and feel alive and start doing things that we love for us and for our kids. So, if you're not quite sure where to start, you are stuck in trying to understand what that fear is or how in the heck do you even figure it out, I would love to chat with you on a connection clarity call. It is a free 30-minute call. It is definitely a no pressure call. I don't want to pressure somebody into working with me that isn't ready, but I do create space and I do an assessment to help you see where you're stuck. And then I offer solutions and you decide if it's right for you or not. So that's what I have for you today. I would love to hear your thoughts about this concept of lazy and how it's related to our nervous system. And until next time, be well and take care.